It's just wonderful to be here. I spent yesterday sunbathing, and perhaps we'll have some more time to do that today. Well, do I get this? Oh, but what's really exciting is being at the birth of a new discipline. 36 years ago, I founded the International Network for Social Network Analysis, and pause while I get some water. Basically, out of realizing a lot of people were doing good research but didn't know or didn't connect with each other. We started then with 175 people, and now we're up to 1,300. We're meeting next year in Hamburg, Germany, and Xi'an, China, and you're starting with many more. So that's really, really cool. Caroline mentioned the book, and here is the only copy in existence. It's unbound, uncorrected, page proofs, but I was told actually just today it's at the MIT Press warehouse, and for $30, or if you can wait a few weeks and save $10, Amazon will have it out probably by middle of May. So up to you, or ignore it anyway. I've been at this business for a long time. This is a replica of one of our high-tech things in the 1960s. I see no reason not to move to the big display. Is that too small for the people in the back? Yeah, I figured that. Okay. Still too small? I can't do any better than that. Okay. You'll have to listen hard, and I always ask questions of the people in the back. So if you want to avoid questions, come up front. There's a lot of seats up front. Just like my students, they lurk in the back. Okay. So I've been at this business for a long time. As I said, we started the Network Society in 1976. Caroline and I, am I allowed to say how long ago that was when we did our research? About 20 years ago. We were in the forefront of looking at network work, working with Bill Buxton, who's down the street at Microsoft, Ron Becker, and Marilyn Manti. And network learning to me has some similarities with network work. But I'm trying to sit and put everything together and get some sense of its significance about it. So I'm going to focus on what I call the triple revolution. I'm going to then actually segue back a little bit to some of the structural changes that we don't really think about much, or in my experience about what's doing the revolution, and then the payoff, some consequences. My work has been informed by a lot of people, but I think most so by my wife for 46 years in the upper left, who was a school teacher in East Harlem, New York, and Newton, Mass, and North York, Toronto, and had just a tremendous amount of experience thinking about kids and analyzing them, and then working with sociologists afterwards. Jerry Bruner, who probably many of you, I think in many ways started large chunks of this field in the mid-60s with his experimental stuff, part of the Sputnik hysteria. By the way, there's always a hysteria. And Jerry and I spent a year together in the Netherlands and stayed in touch. And I'm really pleased. Anybody know David Olson by any chance? Yeah, well, David's getting an honorary degree from the University of Toronto this year. David was Jerry's student and collaborator. Caroline we all know about, although I mean, she's really put the whole notion of cyber learning on the map. And George Siemens, I'm just learning about. Well, George, where are you? You here yet? Woken up? Yeah, okay. We haven't had a flesh meet yet, so this is very exciting to me. So I'm going to talk about three revolutions. First, the turn away from groups. Second, the internet, which we all know and sort of take for granted now. We've gone from the wizard phase to the kind of shrug phase. But especially the fact that the internet is personalized. When you're connecting online, it is you as a person rather than phone calls or visits to a household or to a work group. And when students are collecting online, it is they as individuals. And distance effects have not disappeared, but they've sure been weakened. Francis Cairncross of Oxford and the Economist magazine wrote a book with, as many books are, including mine, has an overly hyped title. Hers was called The Death of Distance. And every data we have since then shows that distance has not died. When I look at friendships, many friendships are within the same neighborhood. When I look at work colleagues, we find that even sitting on the same floor really affects communication than if you're one floor down or, God forbid, in another building. It was Annabelle Kwan-Hasse and I did that. And then Caroline Student and my intellectual godchild, Anatoly Gruzd, and I did a study on Twitter. And we found out most tweets are followed by local people. I don't mean the Ashton Kutcher silliness. I mean real people doing real tweets. And that lines of communication and transportation really took them out. And then the third revolution is mobile. And I'm sure you've all turned off your phones by now. But mobile is incredible. There's a guy over there just tweeting away about this conference. You can communicate wherever you are. You can get information wherever you are. And God forbid you're accessible to others, sometimes when you don't want to be. I got woken by 3 crises this morning back in Toronto because I realized I'm suffering from the West Coast disease. That is, everything's already happened there and in Europe. And so, a report that's due today, give us $25,000. Barry, it's in a mess. Can you fix it? No, I got to shave in Keynote. Fix it yourself. But, that's life. Okay. So these 3 have come together in what I've been calling networked individualism. How many people here are Americans? Whoa. By the way, this is a separate country. It used to be cheap for you guys to shop. But then you put a bunch of idiots in Congress. I am a dual citizen. I was born in the Bronx, New York, which is its own world, and I've lived proudly in Canada since 1967, so I tend to dump on both countries. We have any Canadians here? Yay. Europeans? East Asia? One Australian I know, Shane. Anybody else from? Yeah. Where did I leave out? South America and Central America. Okay, so and Africa I left out, but usually they can't afford to come. Anybody from Africa? So we're pretty broadly distributed. So we have individualism. That's the case Romney gets elected. I figured I'd put that in. But the most important thing is people are networked. That is, they're not bound up. They're not functioning as individuals. We can't really run them through a counter sorter anymore. But they are also connected not in the traditional groups, but in a variety of networks that move around and connect them partially. I'll get into that a bit later. So both words are important. But as we go from atoms to bits, I think despite the fascination we have with technology, the biggest challenge is the turn from groups to networks, and how do you deal with that? First of all, they tend to be, despite what I said about local, they still tend to be further flung than other forms of community. Whenever we go out into the Toronto area, formerly borough of East York, and we talk to immigrants, we found out that without exception, each one is on Skype. They don't have to know what technology is, and many of the grandparents don't. All I know is they push a button and they're talking to their loved ones back in the old country. Sparsely knit, that means most people in your network don't know each other. The best current research shows that average network size for a North American is between 600 and 700, depending on how you count weak ties. Anybody here take Dunbar's number seriously? Anybody know Dunbar's number? Okay, forget it. I have a little article in the British Journal of Psychology that talks about why. The data just don't bear out, probably because people are segueing from one type of network to another type of network. And they know many more than 150 ties that were found with primates or with in villages. So people are moving around multiple networks which they have partial commitment. And you know, there's been an evolution since the old days when pre-industrial ties, where Dunbar's number may have made sense. Little boxes where people were pretty densely connected. And in those kind of villages, people only knew their bands. Well, I'm overstating the case, because there was always people walking through and traveling, armies, camp followers, another word for prostitutes, itinerant prostitutes, which is now legal in Ontario. The Bunny Ranch is moving in pretty soon. And, you know, this is kind of the archetypical village with that stuff. Or this is where my grandparents grew up, and my parents too. Densely knit. Here, not everybody would know each other, but they would sure have a sense of insiders and outsiders. And in the family business, how many people read Fun with Dick and Jane when they were kids or taught it? Does it still make sense? Okay. I'm sorry about that. I guess we've gotten more sophisticated, but this was the primer that I learned to read, and it consisted of father, who went off to work and disappeared off the face of the earth until 5:30, mom, who never left the picket fence, and Dick and Jane, as you can see in the lower right-hand corner, who very much were a togetherness group. And do you remember their dog's name, anybody? I keep forgetting it. Spot, yeah, see their dog Spot. You know, it was a unit. But now we know that, as I'll talk about later, that unit is really old-fashioned. And if you read the New York Times recently, Sherry Turkle had a number that says people connect but they don't converse. Anybody see that? Any Times readers here? No? Vancouver Sun readers? Okay. And, you know, it's Gewalt stuff. Yiddish speakers, I assume, if you're a social scientist, you speak Yiddish, right? The sky is falling, the sky is falling. And when you look at it, every generation looks back to the previous generation, and I've been through a few. I used to have hair, by the way, saying, God, things were good then. We had community, kids were obedient, and why can't they be like we were, perfect in every way? Anybody know where that song came from? Bye Bye Birdie, 1965, my first date with my woman who became my one and only wife. I tell people I've been married 46 years, and one reaction I get is to the same person, and that's important. We now have serial monogamy and a little bit of fooling around on the side. So we keep looking back to the 60s. From the 60s, they look to the 20s. And you can take it all the way back to Ferdinand Tönnies in 1887 when he wrote about, oh my God, cities are horrible. Let's go back to the good German villages. Bob Putnam did it 10 years, well, it's 12 years ago now, saying that television and working women sort of killed community. So there's a history of that. But there's very little evidence that it's true. In the social sciences and sociology, Miller McPherson, Lynn Smith Lovin, and Matt Brashears got a lot of press, and in some ways deservedly so, by saying that number of people who discuss important matters in the U.S. has declined from 2.9 to 2.1. Trouble is the data were coded wrong, and also nobody else has been able to replicate that findings. But there's a meteor moral panic. Turkle, look at the bottom there. We have sacrificed conversation for mere connection. But, you know, she has an interesting data gathering technique. She walks around MIT in the winter and walks around Cape Cod in the summer. And it seems to me one of our missions and one of your missions in particular is to substitute systematic empirical evidence, both quantitative and qualitative, for navel gazing, especially when the navel is at MIT. Only somebody from MIT could think of MIT as a representative sample of anything. Anybody from MIT here? Yay. And what do you represent, sir? What do you represent? I can't hear you. Okay. And you're sure that your experiences can generalize to the world, right? Yeah. Well, I spend my time watching Big Bang Theory, and, you know, I know that Caltech is really where the universe is, that 33-year-old guys who are assistant professors never worry about tenure or grants, but just getting laid. So one of the things we found first is starting in the 50s, when telephones became cheaper. I remember my grandmother shouting across North America, trying to get heard in Los Angeles. When airplanes started going down in price, is that we have a lot of connectivity between places. How many people flew here? Can you describe what you saw on the way? How many people took an expressway? Yeah, somebody raised their Mac Air. That's what you saw along the way. How many people took an expressway to get here? Nobody. Okay, one guy. Most travel we do, if it's not in the neighborhood, is place to place without any real sense of what's in between, except there's slight turbulence in the air. So there was a despatialization or less spatialization starting in the 1960s, but it was still house to house, work group to work group, school group to school group. So it's then when I started reading books like Up the Down Staircase and other fun books like that, and participated in juvenile gangs myself, that I realized that a lot of learning, and I think the world realized a lot of learning, was non-local. But it was this sort of stuff. But now we're starting to look at personal networks that each of us has. This comes from my old East York data, where people have about a dozen to a score of very close ties. And the kin tend to know each other more or less, so there's always some brothers and sisters not talking to each other. Friends sort of know each other, workmates tend not to, neighbors may even have been in each other's house once. But as I said, people have about 600 ties, and so we're going to networked. And we're moving to less face-to-face surveillance, but a lot more surveillance, where we look up, the kind of thing that WikiLeaks has done so well, and covalence, where we all check each other out on Facebook, Twitter, websites, what have you. Who has not in this room checked anybody out ever? Those of you dating, have you ever checked your future boy or girlfriend or ferret out? Okay, so we're all doing some covalence, and it's working around pretty well. And we're noticing when we do this that people have pretty sparsely knit networks, and as we start including weaker ties, they're especially sparsely knit. But the most important takeaway for the talk is that it's the individual, it's the unit, not the school, not the classroom, not the family. And that the person has gone out and got things and operating his or her own networks, and that we're very strongly aware is that learning takes place well outside of classrooms. So the world is not flat because distance matters, but it's kind of lumpy because we tend to have connections in a variety of places. Let me just give you some numbers. This is, my apologies to my fellow Canadians, but it's a lot easier, and we did this for the book. Oh, by the way, there's flyers outside. With that flyer, you can get 5 cents off on the book if you pick it up. They're sitting at the registration table. And if you want to know more. And if anybody wants to know, by the way, it's with MIT Press. Is that a pretty good press? And those of you in the book business, $20 at Amazon, 30 at MIT itself. And there's huge differences between a trade book and a scholarly book. And kill yourself to do a trade book because it's a lot cheaper, gets a nicer cover, if I do say so myself, better copy editing, and wider promotion and distribution. Hey, we got Vince Cerf. We're so cool about that. He's one of our blurbies along with Manuel Castells and a few others. But you can see that the number of cars in the US has gone up. Each individual is mobile. Airline boardings, despite the best efforts of Air Canada to discourage us from flying. You know what? Of all the commercials that bother me, the one that bothers me the most is when Air Canada is voted North America's most outstanding airline. What the hell is the matter with the others? Anyway, nevertheless, flight, as we all know, because we're here, has become a commodity. People are just getting on and going. I used to wear a tie and jacket when I flew in the 60s. Now I only wear ties for keynotes. And a few people with ties here. Oh, I did this one already. Go down. This one comes from my neighborhood supermarket, and we were just looking around one day, and we realized that where all the food in Toronto has come from, and there's about 10 different cities 10 different countries are recommended there. We're being infinitely more connected, as are our students. And our relationships are moving from ascribed relationships in which we're bound by ethnicity and religion. When I grew up, I was barred from fraternities because I was Jewish, and we barred all women from even attending my Lafayette College. A lot of those things have changed. I walk around Vancouver, and outside a majority white, I see so many visibly ethnically mixed couples, although it all seems to go in one direction, which is white guys and East Asian women. And I start wondering about, East Asian guys, you here? Are you lonely? But look at this. 1967, when I got married. No, I got married in 65. Bad. This great movie. Anybody see Guess Who's Coming to Dinner? Okay, you're showing your age. With the world's most beautiful man at the time, Sidney Poitier. And the woman at the left goes off to Hawaii and falls in love, and she calls home to her parents, who are Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn, who were living in sin themselves at the time because they were afraid to get married. Anyway, says, hey, guess what? I'm marrying a doctor. He's gorgeous. He's well-spoken. He's charming. He's everything you can want. And they said, great, bring them over. And they show up at the doorstep, and there's Sydney being dark as hell. Now, this is just an average day in a Canadian right now, but in 1967, it was hell. My God, how are they going to deal with this? There were laws in the U.S. until 1967, same year. Sorry, I'm getting over pneumonia, so I cough a bit. Which said it is illegal for a person of a black race to marry a person of a white race. They never seemed to worry about Asians. The law was called Loving. The legal case that overthrew it was Loving versus Virginia, which I think was a wonderful name. Now, you look on the other side of the picture, and what do we have? eHarmony making money by advertising what to me looks like an interracial couple. They're just doing it for commercial gain. And did I get rid of that one? I'm so sorry. Then we had Chelsea Clinton, America's sweetheart, at least for 54% of the population, marrying a guy. Nobody in the world that I know of, no newspaper, recognized the little bump on the top of his head, which I hope you realize is a kepi, sometimes called a yarmulke. This was a mixed marriage. I think they're still together, aren't they? Anybody know? So, not only are we having mixed marriages, but that things are changing. Then we come in with the internet, which has all these obvious characteristics that I won't bother going into, which is shot way up, so that among the young adult generation, 95% are walking around with computers, or at least have them at home, and the switch has been strong to broadband. Well, we used to think that computers were going to help us and take us off and just go on with the world, although on the other hand, there was the Sherry Turkle fear that they would socially isolate us, as Ryan Lackey, who has since left the island, he by choice never saw people. But obviously we can get instant access to a lot of relationships, and work that geographer Deanna Mock at Western Ontario and I have done has shown that email contact is as frequent with people 3,000 kilometers away as 3 kilometers away. Somebody tell the Americans in this audience what a kilometer is. So, and clearly there's greater speed of contact and greater volume of contact. But more importantly, as I said at the beginning of the speech, we've logged on as individuals. So lots of data on this. That's more than walking around MIT and gazing at your navel. Pew Internet, my beloved co-author and colleague, was still talking to each other. Rainie puts out about a study a month. Last ones are showing that just about every teen in the world, in North America, has cell phones. We've done a whole bunch of studies in Toronto, Connected Live studies. We're putting one out in the field this summer called Networked Individuals. And I'm sorry, it's the first time I've spoken in public since I got rid of my pneumonia, and it's really hitting me hard up here, so I will have to get even more water. By the way, I recommend pneumonia. It knocked me out for a month and meant I could avoid all sorts of deadlines. So people are always having to shop in various places, figure out where they're going. And they can create networks for getting their information spontaneously. What's really important, sorry, I am catching, is whoever thinks that people interact with a different universe online with what they do in real life is not true. As Caroline has shown and Michelle Kasmer has shown, these are intertwined. That learning, information, communication is very much, when it goes online, is an extension of what's happening offline. households have changed. Many children have 4 or 6 parents, which they have to juggle. Time spent at home has gone down. Anybody know Phil Howard and Gina Neff at Washington? These are their twins, and they got their hand-me-down iPhone and a laptop, looks like a good old ThinkPad. When they were 18 months, they're now 30, and I think they may have wireless connectivity by now. They're doing great. But people are acting as networks. The most common email or text, I'm convinced, is, honey, would you bring home a quart or a liter of milk today? I'm also convinced that the most common work email is, meet me after work so we can talk about that bastard. Now, that happened before, see Mad Men, but people find it easier to communicate. And this is an extremely important slide, is that TELUS, fine Canadian cell company, did a good straight study in 2009. I got hold of data. And they asked, how has technology, which people interpreted as the internet, and mobile phones, changed your relationship with the immediate family? Despite all the hype about the internet alienating us by a 5-to-1 ratio, it's the first 2 bars, people said, yeah, it's made us feel more closely connected with each other. Very few said it's alienated. My wife probably would have. She said, why are you looking at the screen again? And equally as important to me is the bottom 2 bars, where 51% plus 7%, 58% basically shrugged their shoulders. Said, oh yeah, technology. Just like people in this room would shrug their shoulders about using a phone. Everybody remember Columbo, the TV series? Okay, I was watching it last night. It's on the Me channel. How's that for networked individual? The Me network. Somewhere up in the upper regions of about channel 30 on your hotel thing. And the first thing I knew is that Columbo picks up a phone, and it has something called a coiled handset to it. But when he picked up the phone, he was at a restaurant, and he had arranged for someone to call him at that restaurant. In other words, he didn't have a cell phone, but he functioned. The other thing that was really weird is when he handled evidence, he didn't wear latex gloves. I mean, I was ready to call CSI immediately and turn Columbo in. But people get so used to technology, we're so used to having cell phones available, that it just happens. So, private and public spaces are reconfigured. Students are you guys tell me, does anybody have a study on where students are getting information from? Or learners, if you want to expand it? Is it from school? Is it from online institutions such as Wikipedia, which I spend a fair amount of time editing? Is it interpersonally? That seems to me one of the main research agendas that I would sure want to know. Because we know that people are moving. This is Richard Florida's data on the creative class, and we can argue about his definitions. But even if we argue, we know that clearly people are becoming bit workers. We're pushing around bits when we're letting the Chinese and the Indonesians push around atoms as they make stuff. So what's going on? Everybody's connected. It's become so routinized. It's certainly not dystopian. People are not feeling alienated, even when they're told so by the New York Times. Connectivity is not fragmented, but our texts, our emails, our Skypes are continuations of in-person relationships. I guarantee that you will make new friends here, even those from Toronto, the dourest city in North America. Any fellow Torontonians here? Yeah, well, isn't it nice here? People talk to you. You'll make new friends, and those friendships will continue when you go online. Sorry, he's leaving. He doesn't want to be singled out. Okay. So you will continue your friendships in many, many ways. And this is sort of obvious, but there's an insistence on the wrong concept of digital dualism, that on the one hand you have online relationships, on the other hand you have offline relationships. Just ain't so when we look at people. Caroline didn't find it so. I didn't find it so. Many studies haven't found it so. But people spend a lot of time thinking about message media fit. Caroline and I got on the phone when we couldn't figure out some basic problems on email. Today, just to make sure I existed, she came down to breakfast and gave me a little hug, chastely, of course. So we all spend a lot of time trying to choose which media, and they all kind of fit together in a media ecology. Third, as we all know, because we could all be tuning in from our conference, face-to-face matters because you get full of bandwidth. So people sitting in classrooms are still sitting in classrooms. One hypothesis I have in conversations is what I call the conservation of media choice, with a little head nod to Newton. That is, if you email me, I tend to email you back. I generally don't run to the phone or something like that. But time has changed, space has changed, and we have to build the internet into what we're doing, as George has said very nicely in his blog just a few days ago. We know, and I stole this, I think, from George's blog, didn't I, that people are taking online courses and they're going up tremendously. We know from Pew data, which this comes from, that people are creating like mad online. This is information that they get. We know, my student Jenny Phillips stole this from somewhere, I'm not sure where, but I stole it back from her, that Wikipedia, English Wikipedia, has a lot of editors. Yeah, I don't know if I trust those numbers, so I'm going to go by them. I know where this is from. This is from Brian Keegan's study of interconnections among people about the tsunami and the nuclear disaster in Japan. People read and connect and modify each other's works. And Nilo Honda from Toronto, I guess possibly of East Indian origin, I met Nella in a cafe in Toronto about 2 years ago. And she had all that stuff out, and I thought it was great. So I said, can I take your picture? Now it's a little bit posed. She did look up and smile. But look at how many pieces of information gathering and communication ability that this 30-year-old woman is having. So just to wrap up now, what's going on? We need to, as I said, figure out where people are getting information from, schools, peers, online ICTs. Are they having real conversations online? I know when I talk with you, when I meet you here, just having met Sean very recently, by putting a name and a voice and an Aussie accent to an email communication, I can understand where he's coming from a lot better. So we want to look at how these online and flesh meetings integrate. And that brings with it the thing, is there any payoff for having local stuff? In Wikipedia, there's a lot of meetups where people editing in the same town are asked to go together. My experience is most people don't show up. Is reciprocity always tit for tit, which is what we found in studying East York? That is, when you help me on X, I'm going to help you on X prime, but not on Y or Z. And information flows. For example, Duncan Watts. Anybody know who Duncan Watts is here? I'm just kind of trying to gauge my audience. Done a lot of work on modeling 6 degrees of separation and other smart books. I think the one most useful for this audience is one that came out last year called Everything is Obvious, if you only knew it ahead of time. And He just did a deal leaving the sinking ship of Yahoo and jumping to the stationary and maybe soon to get moving ship again of Microsoft Research. Well, if I got that information at 3:30, on Twitter, of course, by the time Nasir Contractor posted the same information on Twitter at 4:45, I chided him. I said, Nasir, you're way behind the times. Everybody in the world knows that information by now, right? So information is flowing very quickly through networks. And just to wrap up, what the argument of this talk has been, people function more as networked individuals. Families, work groups have decomposed into being networks. It's rare that the whole group is together during the day. Networks have grown, not shrunk, although the data on that's a little bit squishy. Every study I've seen has shown that, in fact, more internet use is correlated with more interpersonal contact. A lot of people are moving to do their work at home. Not so much full-time as the telework enthusiasts thought about 15 years ago, but taking what I call work schlepping, taking stuff home at night. We have pretty hard data on that. Networks are fragmenting. People are going out and getting more info and more diverse info. And transportation has become somewhat fungible with information gathering. Up until 15 years ago, I actually used to get in the car or hop on my bike and drive to a library. Now, to me, a library is a URL on a website. I haven't been in the building for many years, and neither have my students. Library and Archives Canada is working to go totally digital by the year 2017. They're still trying to figure out what it is they should collect, but they know it has to change into more artifactual stuff than now. This one's pretty unreadable, but the argument I'm making is that there's really been a broad structural change in what's going on throughout society, in which the mode by which people are learning and informing each other just fits into this switch that I've been talking about. And once again, I'm saying that a lot of this stuff we try to document in this book. That's my beloved co-author, Rainie, there, of the Pew Internet. And thanks a lot. I look forward. I can only be here today because another conference of my research grant, a Vancouver-based group called GRAND, is actually meeting in Montreal. Everybody wants to get away. So I'm flying. Anybody part of GRAND here? Yeah, okay. Are you going to Montreal? No. Oh, sorry. Okay. I got to get on a plane tomorrow and go out there because they're my big funders. So thank you very much. I look forward to speaking with you informally during the day and answering any questions or arguments you may have now. And I apologize for my coughing. Sure, I'll take questions.
Maybe you can comment further on how the network individualism, as the student who's sitting there as a network individual, comment more on where they're going to find their learning from or who.
Well, I don't know if they're learning, but they're getting information. I don't have hard data on that, so I'm just going to speculate and say the obvious, that they're the center of a world in which they can plug in my university, to just about every journal in the world. They can plug into Wikipedia. They can also buy their papers. We had one woman hand in her paper this year, which had the notion, as a man, I have found the following. She never learned the word proofreading, so she's out of the course. People are going and just getting much information from many different sources. I don't know about you, but when I lecture, I have to be damn careful about my facts or factoids because the smarter students in class are sitting there with their MacBook Airs. Almost everyone uses a MacBook Air now, unfortunately, and checking my facts out. Yeah, did Pew really say that? Did Wellman get it wrong? They know I'll give bonus points if they get it, if they do it right. I'm sorry, are there MacBook Pro people here too? I mean, guys who spend real money? Okay. So we need, maybe you have the metrics and I just don't know them, but metrics on where that information is coming from is really, really powerful. And I doubt that, I mean, the obvious thing as years in schooling go up, percent of information learned at school goes down as people get better in acquiring stuff like this. The gentleman there wants to ask a question. The mic isn't working, or it's too high or something. Wait, we have high-tech solution.
So I guess the skills that you're we're sort of talking about how to apply a lot of this kind of stuff to education, that students are using it to learn, using Wikipedia to learn. Is this something we should be teaching as we sort of had 21st century skills where people learn how to work with each other? Have you thought a little bit about how to teach people how to actually do all of these things, how to interact with work colleagues remotely, how to interact with telecommuters, how to sort of build that kind of community? Is this something that should be being done to us, or is it something we should be doing to our students?
Okay. I haven't, but Howard Rheingold has a nice book, just came out, also by MIT Press, God, called Net Smart. I think it's even cheaper than mine because it's a little shorter. And it's, if you know Howard, it's in clear, readable prose. It was originally going to be called Crap Detection 101, but then he realized that Walmart sells 20% of the books in North America, and they would never shelve a book with their title, not even in the toilet paper section. However, obviously, searching what I call applied citicism and what Esther Hargitay has been calling digital skills. How do you find stuff? How do you evaluate it? That's obviously really important. How do you trust people? I think a lot of information has been paid, a lot of attention has been wrongly paid to the social pathologies, to the crazy guy who drove a few young women to suicide, rather than the many millions of cooperative endeavors people have. But I'm sorry, I'm not an educator. Well, I am in the sense I get up and lecture. I don't know how to teach those kind of skills. I would assume plenty of people in this room would and would love to hear from them. I'm a sociologist, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Adjustment for height. I have a MacBook Pro, not a MacBook Air. I don't know if that gives me any credibility in your mind.
That gives you stronger muscles.
Oh, definitely, definitely. My question is about migrating among the networks. I'm really interested to know if you've seen any particularly compelling examples of that, because it does seem as if we're compartmentalized among our different networks. And I mean, you even mentioned discussions with your wife who had a different profession and it influenced your thinking in your profession. So any thoughts about that?
No, I mean, what we're doing is laying out a research agenda. And there are two competing thoughts. One competing thought is we all stay in intellectual silos, and that therefore when we find out that Barack Obama is really an evil communist, what is all the nonsense, and really is a closet member of the Muslim world, we only read that. That's hypothesis one, silo. Hypothesis two is there's always a lot of spillover between people and they get information. I don't know of any study that's looked at that. Do you? So is there migration? I'm sorry, there is one by a guy named Valdez Krebs, who's a management consultant, and it's actually hidden away in this book, if I remember. Valdez looked, you know that stuff in Amazon where it says people who bought this book bought that book? Well, he said, hey, that's network data. And so he looked at people who bought some of the key books in the 2008 U.S. election, you know, Obama, McCain, and he found that there were generally 3 clusters without much overlap, which would be the silo theory, really. And he found the 3 clusters were Republicans, why the U.S. is going to hell in a handbasket, the Democrats, hope. And then there was another group that were totally separate that my wife would belong to, I call the Obamolators. Isn't this man beautiful? Doesn't he tell great jokes? He speaks so well. And the people buying the Obama-only books were actually separate from the Democrats or the Republicans. Now, the implication of that for the 2012 election, I don't know, but it would be fascinating. Has the bloom gone so far off? Or the fact that the Republicans are nominating the world's most boring human being. I'm sorry, Stephen Harper, second most boring human being. You know, how's that going to affect it? But I don't know hard data on that. Do you?
Well, one place where I think we might look for it is in the innovation community, because there's often a case, you're talking about political beliefs in your example, but in communities where you have a particular methodology or a particular idea, innovation moves that into a new area of application. So that might be a place where we could look for
Sure,
these
and
examples.
the literature is filled with exciting case studies. What it doesn't show you is all the ones that failed. So that would be one place if I had to evaluate that. I mean, I own stock in 6 companies that never even got an angel investor. I call it vapor stock. Because they were all going to make $1 zillion, this, that, and the other thing. And they all had good ideas. But, in fact, the one I thought, well, it's not, I couldn't buy it, but the one I thought really was going to take off was Google+, which has many of the ideas in it that I've been talking about now. But as far as I can see, it hasn't taken off. So it's a big crapshoot. Well, you got up first, but he was closer, so okay.
Sorry. So I'm just wondering, if you think about how the internet has interconnected and grown over time, or now running out of IP numbers and having to add new ones, where do you see this going in terms of these human networks?
Well, I just told you I lost money in 6. I didn't lose money. I didn't make anything. So where's it going? I don't know. Anybody who does know is lying. But one obvious trend that we see has been the proliferation of mobile and the growth of mobile from more than a phone to a bunch of apps. Some people think that tablets will take over the world. I happen to hate the Apple operating system for tablets and iPhones. I think it is totally crippled. But what I didn't realize is there are more of them out there than me. Them are the people who just want to consume information. And, I've been involved with the internet since before it began in 1976 when Marie Turef and Roxanne Hiltz set up something called EYES. And what I realized only this year is that not everybody wants to be a sophisticated producer. They just want to be able to get what they need about that. And that, to me, was a big revelation. On the other hand, people really want easy apps. So they want to take their pictures of it. I have friends who take pictures of every dessert they eat out in a restaurant and send it to their friends. That's a kind of low-skill, not the desserts tend to be fancy, but a low-skill kind of production of information. So I think we're going in ease of use, and we're going towards a lot of having it available for you, with you, whether that becomes tablets, Ultrabooks, or iPhone 5s coming in soon. I'm not sure what's going to happen. I'm sorry, I'm close to Redmond's. Windows 8, yeah. Any Microsofties here? Okay, thank you. Sir.
As you recognized at the beginning of your talk, this is a pretty new field, new area of research, and I'm very interested to know, in your opinion, what should we focus on in terms of learning analytics? We're trying to set research agendas, and in one of our workshops yesterday, we were sort of struggling to figure out what direction we should go in. So, what do you think we should develop? What should we do?
Okay, here's my little list, which I maybe rushed through as I was getting tired. And that's my list. That doesn't have to be a we list. Demographics, obviously important. The integration of online and offline, where people are getting things from. The payoff question, the one that English universities hate because Margaret Thatcher started evaluating them, whether they're teaching people stuff. And my colleagues would hate it because we have a pretty good life. But how much payoff is in what people are learning? And how does online integrate with offline? So those are the questions I'd love you to look at, but I'm sure, what did you come up with yesterday? I'll turn it back to you. Did you come up with other whole sets of domains that I never even thought about?
Well, we were trying to figure out, for example, how to differentiate learning analytics from analytics in general, or process analytics, because we seem to sort of lost the learning aspect, and we were focusing on process, which isn't a bad thing. Learning is often about process. But we also got concerned about pedagogy. To what extent should we be concerned about pedagogy, and are there normative issues? Are there ethics issues?
That sounds like old line ed school stuff. Yeah. Which you don't have to invent a field for. What I see this field doing is not forgetting about the classroom, but going beyond that and seeing how everyday life integrates with what's going on in the classroom. Now, that may get me lynched or not, but I don't know where this audience is coming from. Sir?
Yes, hi. One of the workshops that we had yesterday concerned issues of privacy. And I was wondering, seeing these British news scandals and knowing just how freely our private information is flowing around behind closed doors, unbeknownst to us, whether you see that might having a dampening effect on this network individualism that you've been talking about.
Yeah, I don't curse as much when I talk now because I assumed you guys are videoing me. Yep, I just left the dams and the et ceteras out. I didn't even say anything nastily about University of Toronto administrators, which I always want to do. But the big thing, I think there's a lot of things going on. We're all creeping each other, a word that my students love to use. We're all doing covalence on each other. We're checking up on each other a lot more. So then when a gentleman with the wonderful name of Simon Buckingham Shen invited me to this conference, I immediately went and started looking at his stuff. Did I pronounce it right, Simon? Close enough, man. Okay. It's my Bronx accent, which works neither in Chinese or in Midlands. Second is we're getting some useful information about what's happening in the upper stories of power, things like WikiLeaks. On the other hand, it bothers me when I go to rate my professors, even though I get a high rating because I did it myself. We still have students broadcasting, as they do in Yelp, et cetera, people broadcasting about institutions on what was good or bad is there. You can game the system. I didn't really do it myself, but I have heard stories about Chinese gold farmers doing Yelp reviews, Yelp-like reviews for money in China, just like they were playing World of Warcraft. But obviously the thing that we got to be most concerned about, and I think one of the reasons why Google Plus never took off, is surveillance down. I basically won't deal with Google when I have to register. They're just getting too much damn information about me. That's sort of obvious, but I think a major trend will be the growth of not only surveillance, but the records that may be transferable about people being in health or education as we go through lives. We all have some skeletons. I have more than most. And I'm not sure I'm really happy with that going on. You got to cut it. Yeah.
Let me thank you, Barry, for a wonderful talk, and we have coffee now, but join me in thanking Barry.
Thank you.